Hello guys, it's Melissa and welcome to another video, and in this one I am building a 60s themed, 60s inspired apartment. I don't want to say it's directly in the 60s because I was not alive in the 60s, so I can't really speak to the authenticity of it, but it's definitely inspired by that period. I mean, I didn't put like a computer or a laptop in this build, and I put like one of those retro TVs from Eco Lifestyle, so I wanted it to feel as much as possible like it was the 60s, but I'm not claiming that everything in this build is very accurate to the time period. I guess in my head I'm just thinking that the person who lives here, or at least the family that lives here, they love the 60s, they wish they lived there, but it's not exactly the 60s. Hopefully that all made sense, but I tried my best to make it as 60s themed as possible, and actually I didn't set out to make this a 60s themed apartment at all. I've seen a lot of people building retro apartments and houses recently, especially since we got the platform update, because I think it's quite typical of retro builds, especially from like the 70s and stuff, to have different levels in your apartments and houses, and I thought that was really cool, and I thought, okay, one day I'm going to do a build like that. But this build, I actually just wanted to do it Japanese themed, so just using basically all the items that we got from Snowy Escape. I built a house in my last video, that was really fun, so I just basically wanted to do a slightly different build in an apartment, but I don't know what happened. I just started placing items, it was super colourful, there was tons of patterns, and I just thought, I'm just going to make this a 60s build. And when I tell you that I had so much fun building this apartment, it was so fun just to decorate and play around with wallpapers and flooring, and as I said, it's just got a ton of colour, it's got a ton of pattern, and once again I'm just experimenting as well with the platforms. I wanted to incorporate that as much as possible, so you've got things like the dining table on an upper level compared to the kitchen, and then you step down into the living room. I really like those little touches, and I think it just adds a different dimension to the build. And I'm definitely, as I said in my last one, even still getting used to platforms. I've noticed a few kind of limitations with them, one being that when you raise a platform height and then you put a room on top of that platform, the floor for some reason raises up quite significantly. So I found as I was doing the floor plan, I had to keep sort of raising and lowering the floors because they kept changing. So that was a little bit of a difficulty, and sometimes when I tried to place items they would sink down to the original floor level, so that was definitely a challenge, but I like challenges when I'm building. It keeps it interesting, and I think it's just doing the dining room there, and that was one of the biggest inspirations for making this kind of 60s themed. I love that rug. I think I love pretty much every swatch of it, and I decided to use the yellow kind of abstract looking swatch, and because of that I decided to use a lot of yellows and reds in this apartment, quite clashing bold colours, but yeah, I really like it. I think it turned out really, really nice. And in this living room I'm actually using bookshelves behind the sofa, which is something that I've seen that Simlessy does a lot in her builds. She is probably my favourite builder in Sims 4 community. I really, really love watching all of her videos, and I've noticed she does that quite a bit, and it looks really, really nice. So I decided to try it. I put some like bookshelves behind the sofas, and I really, really like these sofas. I love the kind of angled shape of them. I think they're very retro. Again, I wasn't from that time period, so maybe I'm completely wrong, but I put that like record player there, so I did try to keep it as 60s themed as possible, and of course lots of like floral prints and I don't know, just things that really remind me of pictures and videos and films and stuff I've seen from that time period. So hopefully I've done it justice, but we will see. And funny enough, I didn't even notice it at the time, but for a very 60s themed apartment, I used a very modern TV and a games console. So I did, as I said, I changed that. I put a bit of a retro TV. Again, it's not supposed to be directly the 60s, but at least very, very inspired by, and as I said, someone who wishes that they lived in the 60s. So I tried to keep technology to a minimum. And the other thing I did that was very, very 60s in this apartment, which I loved, is basically there's 2 kids' rooms. So I imagine there was a child who is a boy and a teenager who is a girl. And in the teenager's room, in my head, she is obsessed with music because, of course, a lot of the teenagers of the 60s were obsessed with bands like the Beatles. So I put a couple of guitars in her room, and I absolutely covered it in band posters. So that definitely made me, well, it just made the build feel a lot more 60s, a lot more of the time. So that's a bit later in the video, but yeah, that was probably my favourite room to do in this house. And I'm just doing the kitchen here, and I really struggled. And I don't know what it is, but I do this a lot where I pick an apartment that's actually quite big, and I start off and I think, this is going to be so easy to do the floor plan because it's so big, and I don't really know what happens. I think maybe I focus on one particular room or one particular sort of section of the apartment, and I furnish that and I plan it out, and then I realise that I don't have much room for everything else I want to include in the apartment. So, because I remember when I started off this build, I had like a tiny little cupboard that doubles up as a laundry room and a toilet, but I didn't want it to be the main bathroom, so I had to kind of struggle to fit another bathroom in. So I find that happens to me all the time. And also the thing was with the kitchen, I was planning on putting it where the dining room was, where the dining table is, and I was planning on putting the dining table where the kitchen is, but I couldn't make the platforms work. It kept changing the stairs to the living room. Again, there are quite a few limitations with platforms, so I played around with that for ages and I just really wasn't happy with it. So I thought, to be honest, the only place the dining table could really work is where I put it. And it looked really cool, but it did mean that I didn't have much space left for the kitchen. And if you build in The Sims, I'm sure you understand the struggle, but if you have a bit of a bump out on the wall like I do there, I mean, because obviously you can't change the exterior walls of apartments, it's really difficult to place counters because you can't really place them diagonally. I mean, you can, but you can't connect them to other counters. So it wasn't ideal. And of course, the other problem I had is that I used the carpet for the living room and the hallway and tile for the kitchen, and I don't know, it just looked a bit weird. I mean, I always use kind of open plan floor plans for my apartments, but this was just a bit too much. It felt a little bit out of place. So what I ended up doing, as you can see, is I kind of made that sort of C shape with the counters, which kind of solved both problems. I had a bit more counter space to work with, and it also separated out the rooms a little bit. So yeah, I was very happy that I did that, and I think it looked really nice. I was actually really happy with how that turned out, because it was definitely a bit of a struggle getting there, but it was worth it in the end. And I used a lot of like half walls in this build as well, because of course we've got a lot of new half wall heights that came with the platform update. And we've got this kind of trim. I think it's a dine-out trim for the half walls. Or maybe it's Get Famous. I'm not 100% sure. But whatever it is, it's really good. And it definitely gives me very retro vibes, like the little glass panels that you can see through. And actually, I did use a lot of Get Famous stuff for this build, because they have a very... I can't remember what the name is. It's a certain style. I think it works really well with the 70s as well. But it's quite a retro feel to it. So I tried to use a lot of Get Famous stuff, because of course matching swatches and things are not always available in the game. So I tried to use Get Famous furniture wherever I could, so I could try and keep a bit of a constant theme going throughout the apartment, especially in the living room. But here I am now, just cluttering up some items in the kitchen, and I did plan to use a cat in this build, so I put a little cat bowl and bed and stuff. And what I really, really like is I put the sort of cat's play tower thing just behind the kitchen counter. So I just imagine like the cat sitting on top of that and watching the family cook their dinner in the evening. I just thought that was like a really nice image in my head. And actually another favourite part of my build is the bar. I put that little like neon sign on the wall, and again I think that's personally quite typical of the 60s, just lots of like bright lights and neon signs. Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, it definitely gave me that vibe, so I really liked using it. And then this is like the little storage cupboard. Again, it's I wouldn't really class it as a bathroom, it's just basically like a laundry room that has a toilet in it as well, just in case, because I didn't want to include only one bathroom, especially because I imagine that there's 4 people living in this apartment. I mean, it could be 3. Basically, there's parents, whether that's a mum and a dad or just a mum, just a dad, I'm not sure. But as I said, a teenager and a child also live here, so they've all got their own bedrooms and their own personalities. I definitely tried to think about personalities a little bit more in this build versus the last one I did. And actually in my last build, I restricted myself to base game and snow escape only. So that's another reason I had so much fun in this build, because I really appreciated being able to use other objects in the game. I think limiting yourself like that really gives you like a newfound appreciation for some of the other objects that we have in the game. So yeah, I had a lot of fun using a ton of different packs in this build, and it's actually available on the gallery if you want to download it. My origin ID is MaddieJ1996. It's very difficult to upload apartments to the gallery, so I did have to delete a few walls and doors and stuff, but you can just add those back in if you do want to download it. And I would love to make some like 60s themed Sims to live in this apartment, so I will definitely be doing that at one point. But yeah, I'm just in the main bedroom here, and I decided to go for a very, very red colour theme. Yeah, like I said, I love messing around with colour, and that was the other thing. My other build was very plain colours. It was lots of sort of blacks and whites and little hints of reds and greens, but mainly it was sort of black and white. So I absolutely loved being able to use colour again in this build. So I definitely did that, and as I said, lots of sort of reds and yellows, because I found we got a lot of like retro looking wallpapers, and they are often in like this bright bold red colour, so I definitely wanted to use those as much as I possibly could. And yeah, I was super happy with it. I think that was the main thing I just wanted to get across in this build, is lots of like bold colours and bold patterns. It's not for the faint-hearted, this build, but let me tell you, this is the kind of apartment I would absolutely love to live in. I love anything kind of retro and vintage. I love anything that is bold, super colourful, lots of cool patterns, and that is exactly this build. So as I said, I had so much fun, and I was so happy with how it turned out. This is probably one of my favourite builds that I've done, and I spent a lot of time over it. Like I spent probably about 5 or 6 hours maybe doing this build, and a lot of that also was experimenting with platforms, to be fair. But yeah, it was so fun. And I'm just moving on to the teenage girl's room now. And as I said, she is obsessed with music. So I put a couple of guitars and lots of band posters and things like that. I think I gave her a pet hedgehog as well, which was like a cute touch, if I do say so myself. But yeah, I said adding all the kind of music posters and stuff. You know, she's the type of teenage girl that idolizes a lot of bands, and you know, the bands that were kind of around in the 60s. So basically any kind of music themed poster that I could find, I put that in. And lots of pink as well. I do find that whenever I do a girl's room, I do use a lot of pink, so I've definitely made a note to myself that in my next build, when I do a girl's room, I will not do it pink. But I really like pink myself. I think that's probably why I do it. But yeah, I really wanted to use that Moschino stuff wallpaper, because again, it's such a bold pattern, but it's like so bold. I think you can only really use it on one wall, so that's why I just did the other ones. Is it like brick? I just thought that was the only way I could make it not completely garish, shall we say. But yeah, then the final room of the house is the boys' room, and for him, I just imagine he was very sporty. He's into a lot of sports, so I tried to reflect that in a lot of the like posters. There's quite a few like trophies, and he's also very messy, so I put a lot of like clutter on the floor, sports equipment and clothes and things like that, and school items. So yeah, he's not the cleanest. And he has like a lot of toys to play with and a lot of like robotics as well. I think there's sort of elements of liking science and being quite a smart boy, but also very, very sporty. So yeah, that's kind of the idea that I had in mind, but I think we're pretty much done now, just coming up to the screenshots. I really hope that you enjoyed this build. If you did, definitely give it a like and subscribe to my channel to see more speed builds, but until my next one, bye!